Hi, I'm Caity Green.
Hi, I'm Dan Green, and welcome back to the Greening Out podcast.
So today we're doing a podcast, sort of the Greening Out introduction to Libertarianism, because we've received a few emails saying that although we do mention Libertarianism on our site and the ideology behind it, where we haven't actually defined our libertarianism, how we understand it. So if you are a libertarian of any kind, you will know all of this stuff that we're about to talk about. It's not going to be news to you. So, but for anybody who doesn't know, this is just some of the core values that we believe. So this is our greening out introduction to libertarianism. Dan, would you like to tell us a little bit about libertarianism?
Yeah, I'd like to start from the background, yeah. Well, the modern libertarianism movement, the way we understand it now, it comes out of classical liberalism, and that goes way back, and we're going to provide a link actually so that you can read about classical liberalism. But for a short introduction, we could spend the whole podcast talking about classical liberalism.
Yeah, so we will provide links, and you can have a little look. That's just really where libertarianism came from. You can,
as we understand it now,
we understand it, and you can look it up for yourself, the background of it.
Yeah, so basically, well, we believe that there's liberty is the highest value really for humanity, and that's important. We also believe that there's authoritarians and libertarians. Authoritarians are, I suppose we could say, people that are happy being told what to do, that are comfortable with it, or have been conditioned to be comfortable with it. And
what I mean by that is, that's not I'm not talking conspiracy talk, they're not conditioned, but what I mean by that is there's always been a government for as long as they've been alive and their parents have been alive and so on and so forth. They would never think to question it.
That is conditioned,
so that's authoritarian.
Yeah, and they just think that that's right, that's what there is. And then there's people that instinctively feel more free.
Yep.
That feel more like they have more of a resentment for authority, and they feel more like they want to do their own thing.
And a lot of people will sort of turn around and go, oh, well, if you don't like the authority, you must be doing something wrong.
Yeah.
We can go into the sort of ethics of that all day. But basically, it's not that I'm doing something wrong, but I do not... It's coercion, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
so
and we will get into that. Yeah, it's
yes.
basically like... you instinctively feel like I don't know who it was, but I heard Keith Preston talking on Radio 314. Keith Preston, who we interviewed recently, by the way,
did, from
shameless plug.
System.
But when he was on Radio 314, I believe he was talking about how he read a quote somewhere that he's been trying to find that, for example, I know we're not talking about anarchism, but anarchists are born, not made. But it is the same way with libertarians, because sometimes some people like yourself, you didn't really have much of a political ideology.
I knew some of the things, I rejected certain things, and
then when you found a name for it, you kind of realised that's the way I felt. So it was kind of like you were born that way, so it's kind of, you were like, that's the way I felt.
That was interesting, and that quote, that really did speak to me. Mm-hmm. And I do agree with that. Keith Preston's fantastic. We had him on, and it was really, really good. You should have a look at that interview for sure.
Check the interview out. But back to libertarianism. So, we come from two basic principles. And the first one is the principle of non-aggression, or the non-aggression principle, or the NAP, whatever you'd like to call it. And I'm just going to read the quick definition from the Mises Institute, so Mises.org's wiki. Now, it says, the non-aggression principle, or also called the non-aggression axiom, or the anti-coercion, or the zero-aggression principle, or the non-initiation of force, I know, but we know what it is an ethical stance which asserts that aggression is inherently illegitimate. Aggression is defined as the initiation of physical force against persons or property, the threat of such or fraud upon persons or their property. In contrast to pacifism, the non-aggression principle does not preclude violent self-defence. Now, the principle is deontological, or that means, rule-based. It's an ethical stance. So basically, quite simply, don't initiate force against anyone else. No violence. Don't do that. But if they initiate force or violence against you, then you're allowed to use again, force against them to repel them, but only because they've initiated the violence. Because that's why pacifism kind of sounded nice to me, but I thought, what if you're being walked all over? How should you not defend yourself?
I know. This is definitely a tough one. The non-aggression principle, and some people might be sitting there scratching their head going, well, yeah, sure, if somebody comes and tries to beat me up, I'm going to defend myself.
Seems obvious, doesn't it?
But when you apply the non-aggression principle, or whatever you want to call it, NAP, if you apply that to everyday sort of situations, and also if you apply it to many different crimes such as rape, murder, robbery, things like that, you are imposing
even things you might do that aren't crimes, but you are like aggressing against someone, like you might shove someone or something like that for no reason, or even like you might be really rude to a family member in an aggressive way. So like when you start to think about it as like a principle to adopt in your life, then you start to think about it, I think, like at every point, Yeah.
So that's the non-aggression principle.
Yeah, and we think that, while it's totally wrong to initiate force or violence against someone, obviously, this is where pacifism again falls down for me, because if someone does really, if someone's breaking into your house and, they're going to shoot you and you've got a gun, you're going to shoot them because they've initiated the force and violence against you. It's self-defense, and you have to be able to act in self-defense.
Now, you probably are sitting there going, well, yes, under our government we are allowed to defend ourselves. Now, one of the very important things to say, though, is that doesn't protect us from the government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's basically the government are going, yes, if somebody breaks into your home, yes.
Well, there has been... I know laws have changed more recently, but there was, remember, the stories...
It's a case, yes.
Yeah, there was a few cases about people who defended themselves against burglars, and then they were ended up in jail themselves.
I know. I think I'll try and find a couple of them online and maybe link up to them.
Yeah.
I will try and find that.
And obviously, again, if we're getting in a kind of legal sense as we understand it now, we're kind of talking more about, how do you prove this or that? So we're not really talking about that, really. We'll get out of that.
This is more of an ideology that you apply, that you do yourself.
Yeah, personal principle for a way to live your life.
And funnily enough, if everybody did that, there wouldn't be any.
yeah, absolutely. No, without a doubt.
That's just what I try and do. I try to be not aggressive
and
as much as I can.
Let's also talk about property rights. Mm-hmm. We believe that property rights are very important as libertarians. That's the other kind of big thing. And I'll just read again a quick few lines from the Mises Institute, Mises.org, and their wiki. It's property or property rights is a general term for the rules that govern people's access to control of things like land, natural resources, the means of production, manufactured goods, and also, on some accounts, text, ideas, and inventions and other intellectual products. But we're not even going to get into IP or anything like that.
No, intellectual property is another subject.
Nope. Yeah, so there's a close connection between property rights and human rights. Ludwig von Mises writes that the programme of liberalism, if I condensed into a single word, would have to read property, that is, private ownership of the means of production. Now, we don't take the sort of Proudhon idea. Obviously, we're not going to get into Proudhon because it's a big subject, but we don't think necessarily that property is theft. So what we think really is that property rights are incredibly important because, I mean, it's hard to really to deny property rights. Maybe you kind of like the sort of commune, everyone owns everything sort of idea, but that really doesn't sit well with me, like, at all. I think property rights are important. I mean, if you think there's no such thing as property rights, and then I steal your car,
yeah, then you'll probably think a lot differently.
You might think, well, maybe.
And as well, you can apply property rights to various crimes as well. Rape, for example, that your body is your property.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good point, actually.
If anybody tries to hit you, they are imposing on your personal property, which is yourself.
Yeah. Well, that's absolutely true, and I totally agree with that. Yeah, because if we say that you own your body and that's your property, then yes.
And that also takes us into other things like victimless crime and things like that.
Yeah. So. Well, why don't we talk about victimless crime anyway? Because that's actually a really good segue there, because we're talking about if your body's your property. I mean, for me as a libertarian, I don't really think that victimless crime should be investigated by the police. You know, someone smoking a joint, you know, or taking any kind of drugs, you know, and for more on this same article, Legalise All Drugs, on the Dan's Rating page of the website.
Yeah.
But these are victimless crimes, and for there to be a crime, you need to have a victim. You know.
Some people will argue, oh, well, it's the drug dealers and the crime and the gangs that are all involved in the smuggling and the production and the blah, 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 blah. But if you actually look into it, if you legalise, that would all shut down. So that argument falls down there.
Yeah, I mean, this is much more, I go into it from an economic angle and stuff in that article. So
we will link up that argument.
Yeah, and you can read article. That, and you can see what you think. So that, because we're just going through a real breeze through kind of our opinion of libertarianism. So another thing I've noticed as well is some people, like, they try and say, like, oh, you're like a conservative to be in this country. You know,
that's not accurate.
And the way I see it, when I explain the difference between a libertarian and a conservative, it's more like a conservative sort of wants to legislate his preferences on you, or he wants to impose his morality on everyone else.
Yes.
Whereas a libertarian, as long as you're not hurting anyone,
we don't care what you do.
Care what you do. So it's like how a lot of conservatives come out against something like gay marriage.
Yes.
You know, whereas a libertarian view, you know, the way I understand it would be like, I mean, obviously, if we're talking economically, then gay couples need to have same rights as married couples if married couples have certain rights. Yeah, absolutely.
Uh-huh.
But it's like, why does it matter what the government think of your relationship? You know?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, that's how I feel as well. And obviously, I'm not gay, but you know, I don't see how that would have anything to do with me having an opinion on it.
I'm not against gay marriage at all. I just think that it doesn't matter what the government thinks. I think we should be all equal anyway, because I think that people who disagree with what consenting adults do with each other, it doesn't make any sense.
And it's funny because on the gay marriage debate, I don't really have a stance on gay marriage per se. I don't really care. It's like how I feel about same-sex marriage. I don't really care. You know, it's there. It's something that you do.
Do what you like. As long as you're not hurting anyone, then fine. Do what you like.
If it's between consenting people, that's absolutely fine.
We don't care.
And it's funny how some people disagree with that. That baffles me.
Oh, absolutely.
So.
And then let's continue this breeze through, because we're breezing through it. Also, another point is people get confused because people are so stuck in the left-right paradigm. You know, they think
if you're not left, you're right. If you're not right, you're left.
You know, and libertarianism is a little bit out of the paradigm. I mean, libertarianism, again, as we understand it, as we espouse it, as we know the philosophy to be, and we're very, very anti-war. You know, which some people would go, that's very left-wing, or at least it used to be left-wing. You know, probably not so much anymore, but that's still considered, anti-war movements are still often considered sort of quite left-wing.
Yeah.
You know, but then, like, we want to drastically reduce government, so then people are like, oh man, you're so fucking right-wing, you're really right-wing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but you don't have to fall into this kind of either-or. I mean, Murray Rothbard talks about where that comes from. It comes from after the French Revolution, you know, the terms left and right-wing, you know. But that's the thing, you don't have to, I mean, actually, I think a cohesive philosophy is not either what we traditionally think of left or right wing.
Yeah.
I think it lies somewhere, not even in the middle, you know, but I mean out with the paradigm altogether.
Yeah.
I think so.
Absolutely, I agree. And I think, you know, another thing I'd like to bring up, this is just a suggestion of a different way.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny, people might go, well, you're just imposing your values on us, and I'll say, no.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't care what you do. This is how I'm going to live my life. Mm-hmm. And I do believe it would be more peaceful if other people decide to live like this as well. It's incredibly empowering. But you can do whatever you like.
Well, yeah, because say we only had, because we lean more to the anarcho-capitalist side. But let's just say we were sort of minarchists, as in we were just advocating, let's just do this for a second. Let's say we were advocating for just a smaller government. Who would say, oh, well, you want to get rid of healthcare and welfare and government schools and all that, and it's only because, see, when you actually research the facts, and for the facts, please go to Mises.org and read everything. But, like, you actually, and read also my articles on the related subjects, but see, when you start to get into it and you realise that instead of a kind of government one-size-fits-all model, if you take things like schooling and healthcare, all these things out of the hands of government and you let the free market deal with it, then people will be able, to provide much better solutions to all these problems.
Yes.
If you just let the free market work with it and you don't have all these government hurdles to jump through, the problems we have with a lot of time is caused by government.
Yep.
Government, you get people who say just now, oh, capitalism's awful. What they're talking about is their conception of capitalism, which is crony capitalism. It's not true capitalism. It's capitalism with government perks and armies of lobbyists.
Yes.
Lobbyists, there's lots of words like, corporatism's another good one. That's what it is. So that's where people get us wrong. If we had actual capitalism, and believe me, see if we weren't being taxed within an inch of our lives, and if we didn't have all these ridiculous government regulations, stuff like what we think about now that's important, like welfare, believe me, private charity would cover that. Because even someone says to me, oh, you're saying we'll get rid of this, what about the poor? I'll say, well, I'd take care of the poor, I'd give some money, wouldn't you? And that person usually says, yeah, I would. So then what are we arguing about?
It's the problem I have with tax, and I'll say this to anybody who ever asks me, my problem is that we're not told. We're not told what it's for, we're not told exactly what's going where, and a lot of the money goes to things that, in my opinion, I did not sign up for. I did not say I would support it.
And it's coercive.
It is coercive because
it's against your will.
If you don't pay it, you're going to go to jail. They will use their force and their weapons to force you into a jail cell.
Yeah,
and that's how it works.
And then again, read my article. Have you ever actually thought about anarchism for like a full thing about why taxation is theft?
5 minutes out of your life.
Yeah, go right.
If you think it's rubbish, you use your intellect to prove why this is wrong.
Well, we don't want to confuse anarchism again with libertarianism.
No.
But it's just, there is a lot of parallels.
It's a branch out of libertarianism.
Because kind of we feel like, we really feel that it's anarcho-capitalism is the logical conclusion of being a libertarian, is kind of what we think, because we don't think that limited government can exist. Our personal view, not a libertarian view, just our view, we think that limited government is one of those things where it grows by its nature.
It's nature. The nature of government is to have all these little different branches out of different little branches until you have this huge
huge tree of government.
The mind boggles. America, they tried a small government.
Oh, really? Really interesting experience with extremely limited government, and then now it's the biggest government
in the world. So we really do urge you to have a look at it,
Yeah, absolutely. We lean to the anarcho-capitalist side, but libertarianism is a broad spectrum, like we've said. There's people that think differently than us, but that's our kind of brief...
The core values.
Yeah, our brief sort of guide to it. Yeah, so like we said, the main two things, the non-aggression principle, do not initiate force against anyone, and if someone else initiates force against you, then you have the right to defend yourself. And also, property rights.
Property rights, you've got people are entitled to their own property and to defend it.
In their body and the things they own legitimately,
own.
And if you want to know about legitimate property, then read John Locke, and you'll learn all about homesteading.
So
I'm not going to do that for you. You do it yourself.
Check out our last couple of interviews. We've had a really, really interesting week. We interviewed the guys from Liberty.menu.
Patrick and Alexander, yeah.
It was fantastic. Liberty.menu is a fantastic website that offers worldwide companies, online and brick and mortar companies,
organizations, events
that are run by people or owned by people that are liberty minded. It's a pretty new site and it's growing, and I'm excited. It's in beta right now, but it's exciting because it's growing. So we interviewed those guys. It's fantastic, and we'll put the link underneath here. And also Keith Preston from Attack the System.
Yeah, Keith Preston, author and founder of AttackTheSystem.com. Really, really interesting show. The man knows he is a fountain of anarchist knowledge.
It was our longest show.
At 1 hour and 5 minutes, the man is a fountain of anarchist knowledge.
And really, he had some great things to say during that podcast.
And we get into a lot of things like pan-anarchism, secessionism. We got into Scottish independence, the American Civil War, so much more. That's a great show to listen to.
Yep, really good show. So we're going to sign off now.
Yep, thanks very much for listening.
So, as usual, if anybody ever wants to come on and say, hey, I don't agree with you, fuck you, we now have a email specifically for hate mail.
We do.
And that goes to my email at randybobandi@greeningoutpodcast.co.uk. Yep. So, hit me up on that if you want to tell me why I'm wrong.
Yeah, and as always, for all the best libertarian podcast ratings and news, visit greeningoutpodcast.co.uk, and thanks very much for listening.
Thank you and good night.